Excellent. I'm live. All right. So, big news today. I feel like I can finally breathe after like 4 years. So, yeah, it's over. Trump's done. In 2 months, he'll be out. It may take the Secret Service dragging him by his feet out of the White House. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm actually okay with that. That's fine. If that's how he wants to go, I'm I mean, I can't argue with that. I mean, just the laughs value alone would just be so funny if that is how it went. And yeah, see what happens. So, greetings, Steven Seagal. What's happening? Good to see you. Ah, yes. So, what's anything exciting happening in your world, Steven? Aside from the election, of course, which has taken up so much of our time this week. So much worry, but ultimately came out okay. It's all good. Doesn't mean that the work is over, by the way. It means that so far things are okay. Things are going to get better, but they're not going to get better on their own. We're still going to have to continue to make sure that there is some accountability and there's some changes that are made. Probably not going to have the Senate, so it's going to be pretty much impossible to make any significant change through legislation. However, there is a lot of power in the executive branch, and most, if not, well, almost all, aside from maybe the tax law and a couple other smaller things, but nothing that significant besides the tax changes. Most of what Donald Trump did during his presidency was through executive action. So Biden can undo all that pretty much day one, plus or minus. Some of it will take a little bit more time. So yeah, we'll see how all that goes. So it's been a while since I've streamed. I'm trying to remember what the link even is to do to link my stream on other social media. I feel like a boomer here. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I see it. Yeah, there. Yep. Okay, perfect. I will do that. Okay. So, anyone else have anything to say? Because yeah, there's definitely so much going on. So there's still several states that are actually not called. Well, not several. There's a handful of states that are not actually called yet. So there's Arizona, which is weird because Arizona. So Arizona is a state that Fox News called like on election night, and conservatives were pissed about this because Arizona was one of these states where, I mean, they were pretty much sure that they were going to take Arizona. There were a lot of Trumpers who were quite sure they were going to win in a landslide. I mean, thus the hashtag Trump landslide that was often going through on Twitter, and it was very interesting how that worked out as well because there were a lot of people who were kind of like, well, we believe based on things like rallies and we believe based on voter energy or excitement or whatever, engagement, whatever you want to call it. There was always that sort of idea that like, oh, it's Trump's going to win because he has energy on his side. But the thing is, what he didn't count on was that there was a lot of energy that he produced on our side as well. So while there actually was a lot more of a red wave than I expected, the blue wave also did turn out because the overall turnout in the election. So in the election, the overall turnout was really high. the turnout for Biden was much higher than it was for Hillary, and Trump's turnout was also significantly, but not as much higher for him. And also, of course, there were some people switching sides, and I think of the people who switched, there were a lot of people who voted third party last time. They're like, let's maybe be a little more cautious this time and go Democrat, because this is not a great thing. Okay, so what else? There we go. Put it on Twitter. Awesome. So it'll be 2000 again. Checkmate libtards. Yeah, right. We will see about that. How are things, Ordo Hereticus? Anything exciting going on in your world? You doubt that? Yeah, I don't think 2000s. I mean, that's not happened. So Pennsylvania was funny. Pennsylvania, on the morning of Wednesday, so on Wednesday morning, Pennsylvania was at 543,000 votes net for Trump over Biden. As that day went on, as the bunches of votes came in, all those early votes came in, I was watching every percent. I have a spreadsheet of this. Anyone who knows me in real life knows, of course, I have a spreadsheet for this. So I had a spreadsheet. It was 78% they had estimated reporting in Pennsylvania. He was down 543K. Every 1% that he got of votes after that was like 35,000, 45,000, 60,000, another 40,000, and it was just every single percent that he got, that lead was just chunking lower and lower. And I did the math on it and was like, oh, Biden's going to win this almost for sure. I mean, I don't even see how it's possible that he doesn't. And now they finally called it. So yeah, so thank you, Stefan. I appreciate that. Stefan says, congrats to you and Mrs. Zaunstar. Yes, the entire U.S. Yes, I saw that. And Stefan, if anything else, if there's anything I can impart to my international viewers, the international crocoduck army, it's that don't ever forget that Trump the first time lost by 2.9 million in the popular vote. He's going to lose the popular vote this time by probably in the neighborhood of 5.5 million. Probably about 5.5 million. It'll be another week or so before we know exactly where that's going to be. There's a lot of outstanding vote still in California and some other places, other very large places that are heavily Democratic. But some places tend to, the voting counts tend to be a little more methodical. Those of you who've noticed that different states in the U.S. seem to count at different paces. So going back to Pennsylvania for a second. Now, Pennsylvania, the Republicans were, of course, livid when they saw that huge count drop, right, from 543,000 down to zero, down to up to a Biden lead. But this was a monster of their own creation, and this is why. Their legislature. So especially for the benefit of the international crocoduck army, each state has its own voting laws. Each state runs the election locally in their state. And yes, they're under certain general laws and guidelines, but they have a fair amount of leeway to do it. So in Pennsylvania, they were going to count their absentee, or their early ballots, I should say, early, because they knew they had a ton of them, like a couple million or something like that. They knew they had tons of these ballots. But the Republican legislature in Pennsylvania would not let them count early. So they said, okay, you'll have to count them afterward. What they wanted, and what they in fact got, was that Pennsylvania was the critical state, it turned out. And so when these votes kept going up, it was like, well, Trump fans, you don't get it. You had Trump telling his fans for months, don't vote early, go to the ballot box on the day of. So he racked up a big lead, but all the Democrats got the different message. The Democrats got the other message, like, go ahead and vote now, get it out of the way, which, by the way, I completely agree with. Why would you not do that? Why would you take the chance on something happening on election day, some emergency or whatever? Do it at your leisure, get it out of the way. I have always gone to the ballot box. Aside from like one time, I was once or twice, maybe I wasn't here, but never for a presidential election. I always went to the ballot box, to the polls. But this time I did it by mail because of the pandemic, etc. I also figured there's probably going to be a crush of people because I knew turnout was probably going to be high, and it was right. So yeah. So congrats, yes, congrats indeed to everyone. So Georgia, James Brzezinski, you mentioned Georgia. So Georgia is at about 7,000 and some right now, I believe, a lead for Biden. That was one that was chunking down very slowly. They had a lot fewer total votes. See, in Georgia, they counted all the early votes early. They're controlled by Republicans too, but there they didn't decide to do that for whatever reason, to wait until election day to have them counted, like they did in Pennsylvania. So yeah, what I love is I love that meme where it's got it's got Buzz Lightyear and Woody from Toy Story, where Buzz Lightyear's flying and he's like carrying Woody, and Woody's like, Joe, we're gonna lose Florida, and then it's Buzz Lightyear, but it's got like Biden's face on it, and Biden says, listen, Jack, we're not aiming for Florida, and then the next frame is a picture of 270 to win, and it shows the Southeast, and it shows Georgia in blue. That's just classic. That's just whoever made that. They won the internet for me yesterday. So, fake votes, yes. So there are a lot of people who were talking about fake votes, right? Now I have a number of friends on different sides of the spectrum, and all that's cool. I've said my piece when it comes to everything related to that, right? But there are a few friends that I have, not very many, but of the Trumpers that I have, there are a handful that are on the fake votes bandwagon, or they're sort of, riding the line between, well, I mean, it seems a little fishy, but what? So okay, I can live with that. I mean, it's super weird, but whatever. But then I do have a few that are like, oh, this election's getting stolen, but they're not as loud as I thought they might be. A couple posts here and there, nothing too crazy for the most part. So weirdly, you think COVID helped Trump? KGD Blade says, weirdly, I think COVID helped Trump in the sense that a lot of people wanted to just forget about it, the same way 2016 was that we don't want to think about politically correct attitudes. Yeah, in 2016, we were still in the midst of the whole anti-SGW or whatever sort of thing, where that sort of became front and center. I have no idea why. Well, actually, no, I do kind of have an idea why. The whole anti-SGW thing seems that it was originally created, or it was spun up by Republicans to try to push people to the right, because most people who have very, very most people who have extremely rigid thoughts on that particular issue, or people who are super excited about that issue, tend to be on the right. I mean, everybody has opinions about that stuff. I mean, I do too. But it's not, in terms of policy or like importance to the world, it's literally like on a list of 100 things that are important. I mean, maybe it's number 80 or 90, if that. It's like, no. Not significant to me at all. So in terms of recounts, there are a lot of people that are worried about recounts. And again, especially for the International Crocoduck Army, I know you can see the returns, of course, as well as I can. But here's the thing. There's almost never a significant difference between the recount and the original count. There are, of course, there's always going to be a small difference. But getting like 20,000 votes in a state the size of Wisconsin, no, it's not happening. It's just that would be almost impossible. And it doesn't matter because Biden, it looks like, is going to have more than enough cushion. So in case even one state goes his way, and by the way, in most cases, it seems like most of the time when there's a recount, the recount tends to be maybe slightly in Democrats' favor, because some of those ballots that are not necessarily they don't run through the first time or something like that. They tend to be slightly more in Democratic districts, but for the most part, there's almost no difference. You have to be super close in order for a recount to work. 20,000, yeah, it's not going to work. Yeah, as Scott Walker himself said, it's not going to happen, and he's the former governor of Wisconsin. So, and yes, Bree, welcome to voting by mail. Yes, it is good, and for you folks in Washington State, you have been voting by mail much more than most of the rest of the country has. But now so that's something that I would also like to think that at some point, I'm hoping Democrats will be able to pass some sort of federal voting rights act. The thing is, here's the thing: Senate is probably still going to be Republican. Most likely, there will be, in fact, almost certainly, there's going to be a runoff election in Georgia for both of the Senate seats, both the one that's normally up at this time and also the special election. So there's going to be, so that both of the Senate seats in Georgia are up. The Republican candidate did not get 50% in either case. No candidates got 50% in either case. So it's going to go to a runoff in January. Not all states are like this for the Senate, but Georgia is. So that'll go to a runoff, and we'll see what happens there. Typically, what happens in runoffs is Democrats lose because the turnout is typically not nearly as high. And usually in an election where there is not as high turnout, Democrats tend to not do as well. So it's possible. It's absolutely possible. Georgia, we never thought Georgia was going to be. I mean, there were polls that had Georgia this close, and I was like, yeah, whatever. I don't think we're taking Georgia. I was like, well, I feel hopeful about Florida, though. Meanwhile, we get wrecked in Florida, but Georgia looks like we're going to pull it out. I mean, how? I don't know. The polling error, basically, the polling in Georgia was much more accurate than the polling in Florida. The polling in Florida had a very slim but sort of 2, 3, 4 point lead for Biden, and it turned out to go like 2.5 points the other way. So that polling was way off. But Georgia, they had us up by like, maybe a percentage point kind of thing. And it looks like that's about what's going to happen. It's going to be less than a percentage point. So that's pretty good. So yeah. So CMB Reggae says, hey, Eric, how goes? Feeling good? Yes, I'm feeling fantastic. Thank you. I'm feeling fantastic. Thank you. And so I don't think that we're going to win those runoffs, but I'm hoping. I'm hoping. And as far as the states, yes, if Arizona comes through for Biden, that means I got 48 states plus both of the special districts, but both of the two special districts are up, like Maine 2 and Nebraska 2. I got those correct as well. If it were just Nate Silver from 538, he got like 5 wrong or something like that. But when all is said and done, he's probably gotten like 5 wrong. So, I mean, I should be making his kind of money, I assume, right? Is that how it works? I think it should. Kendrick John says, do you think that maybe Trump supporters know all this talk about fake news and rigged elections is bogus, but they simply embrace it as an act of rebellion, deplorable as an identity? It's always hard to say. I have some friends. I have a couple friends. I have like a couple dozen friends at least who are Trump supporters. Okay, but of those Trump supporters, there are only a handful that are. So people that I met through work or through college or something like that. Most of my friends who are Trump supporters are people I knew from high school. So I went to high school in a small city in upstate New York, and it's pretty conservative, not super conservative, but it's maybe reddish purple, but not like crazy. But so I think what happens is there's a segment of those people that are the true believers, but I always used to think, at least, that the people that I've known since high school are more level-headed Trumpers, maybe. But I am not sure that that's entirely correct. I've definitely seen some weirdness, even from those people, about the election being stolen and all this sort of thing. So, yeah, very tricky to say. And Emmett Brown says, Ossoff's it's not just that you're a crook, Senator moment was awesome. They should use in runoff campaign. Yeah, that was, I did see that that debate with Ossoff, and I was very impressed. And Ossoff, as I recall, he was the Democratic contender in the special congressional race, which he lost, but I think he lost, but it was pretty close. It was closer than most people anticipated. So that's good. I don't know if he's going to win, but he has a future for sure. And you got to hand it to Stacey Abrams too. Like, I wasn't sure what to make of her because I hadn't heard of her before until she ran for governor, and she ended up losing, but not by very much. And the outreach, the amount that she and Keisha Lance Bottoms, the mayor of Atlanta, both of them, the amount of work that both of them put in to turn Georgia blue, just, I mean, my virtual hat is off to both of them. Just amazing. That was just, yeah, fantastic. So yeah, we both beat Nate Silver. We can split the winnings. We just need to somehow collect Nate Silver's salary. So yeah, I got one. So if assuming Arizona pans out, it means that let's see, he had predicted North Carolina and Maine 2 and Florida. I had also predicted Florida, so subtract that from both of us. But then he had predicted North Carolina. I did not. So yeah, I'm sure I'm ahead of him at the moment. We'll see about Arizona, though. Arizona's going to be super close. I think Fox News got it wrong when they called it. I mean, I know they got it wrong when they called it. They never should have called that. But fortunately, it's not going to matter, even if Arizona ends up going to Trump, which it might. It's literally like 50-50. Every time I see a chunk of votes come in, Biden's lead gets whittled down, because those votes are different from, again, for those of you who haven't been following this super close, the reason why the votes in Arizona are very different from the votes that are in Pennsylvania that are being counted is because the Arizona votes are same-day ballots, and those ballots tend to be much more Republican, tend to be much more for Trump. So those ballots had a very, very different sort of they had a very different sort of flavor, let's say, than the ballots in Pennsylvania. So we'll see about that. And let's see. The Red Mirage really happened. David Pakman and others were absolutely correct about it. Yeah, he was correct about it. I mean, everybody pretty much said that that's what was going to happen, and that's what happened. Red Mirage. In some states, it was a blue mirage. In some states, it was a red mirage. It just depended on when they were counting. It was like Ohio looked like a blue mirage, right? Because they released all of those early ballots because they had already tabulated them. And it was like, oh, Democrats did really well. But then all the same day votes came in, and Ohio just went red. But Pennsylvania, other way around. And they only have themselves to blame, as I said earlier, for that happening. It doesn't really matter. I mean, whether the Pennsylvania legislature had decided to do that or not, it doesn't matter. The net result of it, though, is it made the call for the race take 4 days. And that's the kind of thing that the Trump campaign wanted. The Trump campaign wants there to be controversy. They want it to take days to figure out what is going on, because those are days that they can then use to sow discord and sow misinformation and everything else. So if the race had been called on maybe say Thursday, I'm not even holding out for Wednesday. Let's say Thursday. The race had been called 2 days ago. They would have had much less time to try to gin up all this controversy. So, yep. And securing the midterms in the Senate, that would be great. So I would say normally, and so here's one thing: Pat Toomey is going to be retiring in Pennsylvania. That's a pretty likely. Well, it's definitely going to be a target. Whether they get it or not, I don't know. But Toomey is going to be retiring in Pennsylvania, so that's a seat that they're definitely going to be targeting. There are other seats as well that they'll be targeting in 2 years, and there's a very good chance that they could take the Senate. Now, this time, I was pretty surprised that Susan Collins got reelected. I was actually quite surprised. I thought she was done. Cory Gardner, I figured was done, and he was done. Martha McSally in Arizona, I figured she'd be defeated, and she was. Doug Jones in Alabama, figured he wasn't going to be able to make it because it's Alabama, and he's not running against Roy Jones or whatever. Yeah. What's his name? Yeah, Roy. That guy, Roy something. Roy Moore. Yeah, that's it. So no, not Cooper. Roy Moore. So that all went as I expected, but Susan Collins was still elected. But then, so Cunningham versus Tillis in North Carolina, that race is still really close. I suspect, and Tillis was not particularly popular, but that sexting scandal that Cunningham that was just such an unforced error. Like, why would you do that? Like, it's like some constituent's wife or something who wasn't even looking for that, and like, you why? It was just a very bad move. He should never run again. So, Jefferson, or J.I. Pettersson, probably. I'll bet you were Scandinavian. So, so the whole, or maybe it's Jefferson? I don't know. So anyway, Alaska. Alaska is a huge state, but a very small population. And Alaska, for some reason, takes forever counting. But Alaska's heavily Republican. There's very little chance that Alaska has any statewide races that are going to go Democrat. It's just the way Alaska is. All right. And if PA had counted, yeah, exactly. If PA had counted the mail ballots earlier, it probably would have been over on the 4th. Yeah, it probably would have been done on the 4th, and we would not have had all of this drama. But that's what they wanted. That's what they got. But it makes victory all that much more sweeter. All that much more sweet. So, Meds. How's it going, Meds? So, will Trump supporters stand down in orderly fashion? Most of them will. They might complain about it, but they'll do it. There will be a percentage that won't. I assume you probably saw what I posted yesterday about the 2 guys from Virginia, the state where I live, and they drove up to Philadelphia with an AR-15 in their vehicle and with a QAnon sticker on the back of their Hummer and a bunch of fake ballots that they were somehow going to get counted somehow. I don't know exactly how they were thinking they were going to do this, but somebody tipped off the police. They were intercepted, and they're out of action. They got arrested on weapons charges and other charges. So yeah. Don't know if everyone is going to be orderly about it. I actually thought there was going to be more violence, and I'm very happy that there's not. But I suspect that we may not have seen the last of the possibility of violence. I obviously I hope there isn't, but it's very difficult to say at this point. Now that it's sinking in that he's done, most people who are sane and rational, reasonable, are not going to do anything. Even the ones that aren't are just going to post some dumb things about the election being stolen on Facebook and just deal with it. Don't go away mad, just go away, right? So there's going to be a certain percentage who are going to be super upset about it, and there's these militias and various other groups and just Looney Tunes people all over the place who are going to get super upset about it and use it for recruiting white nationalists and stuff like that. But I don't think at this point that that is. I don't think at this point that that is a super huge concern this second. Again, there very much could be, and I expect maybe will be in the future, some latent issues that come up later. I hope there isn't, but we'll find out. Yes, they're only fake ballots when we claim Dems did it. Yeah, eternally projecting. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's a lot of there's always this whatever it is that they're accusing you of is the thing that they actually are doing. Like, I think one of the funniest moments was the other day when Trump tweeted "Stop the count." When he didn't realize, he either didn't realize or didn't care, or was just too dumb to understand that if they stopped all the counts at that point, Biden still wins. Biden was ahead in enough states that it would make 270 electoral votes. So Biden should have, well, I mean, not seriously. Obviously, you shouldn't have done that. But if I were Biden, I'd be like, yeah, sure, okay, let's stop the count. Yeah, let's see what happens. It'll be great. We'll stop the count. And if you want to restart it, assuming we can restart the entire thing, we can restart it. But there was never any time. There was never a point at which he was up. So. Yep. Accuse your enemies of that which you yourself are guilty. Yes, that's it. That's a Goebbels thing. Yes, you're right. That's it. I wasn't sure if that was Goebbels or if it was Animal Farm or Goebbels. Is it? I should try to pronounce it right, I guess, since I speak German. So they'll claim that it's part of the plan that QAnon. Yeah. Yes, there are plenty of QAnon people still around, and now there are some in Congress. Isn't that great? So now that Trump, their God Emperor, is out, and he has really no power to do much, certainly not much politically. I mean, sure, he can be like a kingmaker or something like that, but the more he presents himself as a clown, the more less credibility he's going to have for next time. So I suspect that at this point, there should be, honestly, and I've heard that there to some extent are people in his orbit that are now telling Trump to, hey, you might want to chill out, because if you want to keep any of your influence, if you look like too much of a clown, you're going to turn off the people who you need in order to give you work later on. Like if you want to work on people's campaigns, you want to do all kinds of things with Republican Party in the future, like you need to get it together and not be such a clown, because you're just going to lose whatever shred of credibility you have. I mean, of course, to most Democrats, he lost credibility like 5 years ago when he first came down that stupid escalator and made the dumb speech about the murders and rapists and drug dealers from Mexico. That was like the very first. That was our first sort of access to him politically. Was that, at least for me, like that was the first time I saw like what he was doing. I'm like, he believes that? I mean, this dude's from New York City. See, I didn't know all of his history either at that point. I didn't know all of the backstory of other various things that happened in New York, and So he did have definitely a history of racism. Of course, there was the Obama birther thing, and we all did know about that. And the birther thing was insane, and that definitely put him on my radar as somebody who was a loon. But once he became a serious candidate, yeah, it all became very real after a while. So yeah. It's also, so James says, it's also one of those things I want to see with Dan Crenshaw, Devin Nunes, and some of the other toadies going to act without Trump there. Yeah, Devin Nunes, Dan Crenshaw, like, he was a guy who came across as like, oh, I'm just a regular guy with an eye patch, and isn't that cool? And like, oh, he's a decent human being and whatever. But Dan Crenshaw has absolutely just taken up the mantle of just a right-wing talking head, putting up the usual talking points on his Twitter feed, and my Republican friends love him, but he's not interesting. He's not novel. He's not new. He doesn't seem to have original thoughts at all. He's just a mascot. I don't know. I'm not impressed with him. I was prepared to actually be somewhat impressed with him. Even as a Republican, would have been like, oh, well, he's maybe new, different, younger, blah blah blah. But no, totally not at all. First lady's going to file for divorce within the year, I imagine. Well, she had plenty of chances before then, and she hasn't. So I'm suspecting she won't. Although I do kind of love the memes. There was a there was a meme somebody posted where she's on the phone. She's like, I don't do Christmas shit anymore or something like this December. The whole thing with the her friend recorded her complaining that she had to do the Christmas stuff, and like, yeah. So that was kind of funny. I like that. So anxious to see if we can work toward the promotion of education and science and critical thinking. Yes, repairing our image around the world is actually, I think, it should be something that is put forward by Biden's team, and I'm sure it will be, because we have a lot of our allies. We have lost a lot of face, a lot of trust from our allies, and for good reason. I mean, how can you trust a country who is at the same time they're pushing, you would expect the opposite, right? You're supposed to push your enemies, but then, bring your allies closer. And he's doing the opposite. I mean, it's no wonder that Russia wanted him to win. I mean, of course Russia wants him to win. Russia doesn't want the United States to have a lot of power. And so a great way for him to not have power, or for us to not have power, is to have somebody that's completely incompetent at the reins, and will also take down our allies with him, our allies who also Russia does not like. So yeah, it's the perfect way for him to go about that would be to do exactly what he did and hurt our allies and hurt the relationships of our allies. So Biden's going to have to go back in with NATO and go back in with many of our other allies and say, hey, we're back to normal now. We just had this little 4-year blip. Sorry about that, but we'll figure this out. I love that Justin Trudeau, of course, already congratulated Biden on his win. I'm thinking, oh, Trudeau must have been so pleased to see Biden win. Can't imagine. So yeah, GOP and Fox must have been just as exhausted as the rest of us keeping up with the lies. They should be relieved. Yes, they should be relieved, hypothetically. Maybe some of them are relieved. I think there were probably a fair number of people on Fox who know that Trump's a clown, but didn't want to say it and didn't want to get in trouble. So Hockey God 98, Bernie or Buster, the Bernie or Busters destroyed any potential leverage they thought they had, didn't they? If they really did sit this one out, it still resulted in the highest voter turnout in history. So there are certainly some Bernie or Busters left, or let's just say people on the left who hold out for who knows what. It depends. Depending on who you ask, it's any number of different things. They are things that are important. They're not unimportant things, but this idea that they're going to, instead of working with an apparatus that's already in place, instead of taking over that power center, they're going to create their own competing power center. I don't think it's a terrible idea, because all it's doing is, especially in this case, it would be enabling essentially fascism, proto-fascism, neo-fascism, something along those lines. We'll call it proto-fascism, I guess. But by not voting for the one person who can beat Trump, that's not a great idea. I do, however, think the Democratic Party should be moved somewhat left to a point, although I do have a lot of my friends who are, for lack of a better term, Bernie or bust. There are a fair number of them that want to move further left than I even do. But we'll see where that comes out. But that's where the primaries come in. That's where you say, okay, well, see who can get the votes in the primaries. Not who can get the biggest crowds, but who can get the biggest number of votes. What people always forget, and I said this in my last video, there are a lot of older voters, and they vote super reliably. People like my parents. I mean, my parents are certainly Democrats. They consider themselves liberals, but they are not Bernie people. I'm not particularly either, to be honest. I voted for Elizabeth Warren in the primary, as I said in my previous video. She might end up being Treasury Secretary, which would be cool. I've heard that Bernie might be Labor Secretary. By the way, that would be cool. I'd be 100% on board with that. I don't dislike Bernie. I just don't think he was as compelling a candidate as his fans thought he was. I hear a lot of talk about, oh, Bernie would have, done, this or that, or would have suplexed Donald Trump off the top rope in all 50 states or something. And no, that's not the reality. It just isn't. And I hear things like AOC saying things like, oh, all of the candidates who ran on Medicare for all won their House seats. Well, yeah, because the people who are running know their districts, and even the people who believe that Medicare for all would be good are not going to run on it if they're in a district that's super purple. So there's a bit of sort of selection bias, I guess, for lack of a better term there. But overall, by the way, AOC is fantastic for the party. AOC is someone that I was very slow to warm up to, partly because I thought she came off a bit naive, and I do think she was a bit naive. There were a few things that she said about world events, and there was like geopolitical stuff she didn't seem to fully understand. But now she seems to understand it much better. Obviously, she's young. She's great with social media. She very much energizes people. Yes, she's a lightning rod for conservatives, but they're always going to find a lightning rod. So her being that person, I think that's fine, because she's actually someone who's able to defend herself far better than most people are in terms of Congress. I mean, can you imagine Pelosi being that nimble to parry off those attacks without having someone run her Twitter feed? AOC can do it by herself, because she knows what to say. She knows how to burn them, and she knows how to basically make bulletin board material out of the stuff that's put out there about her. So, hats off to her too. Let's see. So what are you expecting in the coming 4 years? A turn in the right direction, or just more U.S. imperialism / corporatism? Let's see. And Yanis Varoufakis. Nope, I don't think I've heard of him. The name sounds maybe a little familiar, but I don't know. It sounds Greek, but I don't know much more than that. So what am I expecting? A turn in the right? Well, I do expect a turn in the right direction. I don't expect a turn completely in the direction I'd like to see it, but you also need to compare it to the last 4 years and the direction we were going there. And there's a lot of course correcting that's immediately going to happen, because as I said earlier, most of what Trump accomplished was through executive orders, and it was not through legislation. So Biden changes that on day one, potentially. There's any number of things he could change net neutrality, LGBT rights as it relates to the Department of Justice, how that stuff works, or what they defend or go after. Let's see, trans rights, the military, the trans rights in the military kind of thing. All of that. There's a lot of abortion stuff. The Mexico City Accord or whatever. I forget the Mexico City rule, something like that. There are a lot of different things that Biden can do day one, and some of those I believe he will do. And in fact, I'm certain they'll do some of those. He's already said he's going to put us back into the Paris Accords for climate change. So he'll do that. That's certainly a good thing. Some things that'll be harder to do is to get the Iran deal back on track, the one that he helped Obama to get in place, which was great and was working. But then Trump ripped it up because it was something Obama did. So that was stupid, but I don't know if he's going to be able to. I think that'll take some doing, but we'll see. So yeah, there are probably some moderate Republicans feeling a sense of relief. There are a lot of I have quite a few friends, mostly the ones that are more educated, who are or were Republican, but are trending more Democrat now because of the last, not just 4 years, but the last like 20 years or so, just the way things have shaped out, but especially in the last 10 years, seeing the difference between Obama and Trump and being like, yeah, we're not having this. But that's the whole thing with the suburbs, right? Suburbs are trending more Democratic. Rural areas continue to tend more Republican. They're as Republican or maybe even more than before. But the cities are pretty much the same. Tend to be more heavily Democratic. The one big shift, one of the biggest shifts in the last 4 years demographically is education level. And I don't say this, by the way, I don't want anyone to get this wrong here, or get this twisted, as I say. So I'm not saying that there's anything inherently wrong or different or whatever about people who don't have as much education, but this is a very clear trend, is people with a higher education level are tending now to go more left, and people with less education on average are tending to go more right. That was one of the big things that they changed in the polling last time, between last time and this time, in the last 4 years. One of the big things they changed in polling was saying, okay, we're going to sample by education level to make it fit with the population, right? And they thought that that was going to make the difference in making the polling more accurate. But the polling, I'm definitely pretty down on the pollsters right now. 4 years ago, the pollsters had it wrong, but they didn't have it wrong by very much. It was by a couple percentage points. I mean, it was wrong enough that you could see it, but it was not wrong by a lot. There were a lot of people who were jumping on the, pollsters are all full of crap bandwagon. I was like, guys, this was within the margin of error. Even in a poll of polls, it was well within the margin of error. But what happened was this time, the polls were well outside the margin of error for many states. And so something's going on there, and they need to figure that out. Yep. It's going to have to happen. Let's see. Do we still think the Georgia Senate seats could go blue? Yes, it is possible that the Georgia Senate seats could go blue. And I talked about that a little bit earlier. It's highly unlikely, though, because runoffs tend to have much lower turnout. Lower turnout tends to not help Democrats. Georgia, with Herculean effort, we apparently are going to get Biden over the line in Georgia in a runoff, and in a runoff where Democrats did not get, especially in the one race that was pretty much one-on-one, they did not get 50%. Even though Biden's probably going to just barely win Georgia. So I don't have very high hopes for that double runoff. However, with that double runoff, that would give us 50. which would be enough to take the Senate. So if we can find some way to get the kind of turnout and to get the kind of voter action, if Stacey Abrams, Keisha Lance Bottoms, and all the rest if they can work their magic again, it's possible, but don't count on it. I'm expecting the Senate's probably going to be 52-48. Remember, though, before this, it was 53-47, and we didn't have the presidency to break a tie. So we functionally went from like 4 votes that we needed to break through in order to win anything to 2. So it's good. Not as good as it could have been, or I think should have been, but it was something. D. Landon Cole. Good evening, YouTube. What's happening, D. Landon Cole? Anything exciting? So D. Landon Cole is an old friend of mine from YouTube. I don't think he's been on YouTube in quite some time. He's out of that game, and I'm sort of somewhat out of it. But I always dip a toe back in every once in a while, And if I want to do, I'm thinking of doing more streaming. Actually, it would be fun to do streaming more frequently. I'd like to do that. So and maybe chat with people. Have maybe not debates exactly. I'm not sure if I'm the best debater ever, but I could do something like that, or just chat with people, whatever. That'd be fun too. So yes, Dean Landon Cole. No, David Landon Cole. There he is, right there. It'll be like Blog TV again. Yes, exactly. Yes. I always remember how you started your videos. Good evening, YouTube. I believe that was how it was. Not sure if that's the best British accent I've ever had, or ever done. My British ancestors are probably like amateur, but whatever. They were hundreds of years ago. Do I have a Twitch channel yet? I do, but I have not done anything with it particularly. I mostly just watch Overwatch League and other stuff on it. Yes. Yep. Talk about the House. Going to be so much drama. So in the House, it looks like Democrats are going to lose about 5 seats, which is pretty disappointing considering they were expected to gain like 5 seats. Losing 5 seats is not a huge deal, but it's not great. Let's see. Let's see. Best thing about my PhD is every time they're up for jury duty, they kick you out right away. Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, they definitely do not want educated people on a jury. That is typically something that they don't want. I've gone to jury duty twice, where I've had jury duty 3 times. Twice I actually got into the courtroom and was going to be seated. They asked the questions or whatever, and then I wasn't chosen. One time they asked, well, what are your thoughts on legalization of drugs? And they said, does anyone on the jury have any thoughts on the legalization of any drugs or something? And I was like, well, for marijuana, yeah, I think it probably should be legal. But they said specifically that the case was not a marijuana case. It had nothing to do with marijuana. It was some other. It was not a pot case at all. It was some other, but probably heroin or something. I don't know. But they didn't want me on that jury regardless, even though I would have completely, I would have been fine with being on that jury and finding someone guilty of something to do with heroin potentially. But with pot, yeah, it would have been a hard sell. So yeah. What else? Did you see the list of probable cabinet members? Biden is a Republican. Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to figure out how far I can roll my eyes in the back of my head without without losing my contact lenses. This whole Biden's a Republican thing. I mean, okay. Biden for sure has had some positions in the past that are definitely well to the right of where most of the Democratic Party is today. However, a lot of those positions were at the time pretty close to what a lot of the Democratic Party was at that time. In the 1990s specifically, so I'm old enough to remember politics in the 1990s, I voted for Bill Clinton twice. my first election, voting in a presidential election, was Bill Clinton's first election, 1992. So in that election and in the subsequent election, 1994 and stuff like that, Republicans were killing Democrats on the crime issue, right? For Democrats, it was an existential crisis. If they couldn't get a crime bill passed or something like that, they couldn't do it, they were going to get crushed at the polls in 1996 as well. And they'd already gotten crushed in 1994. So that was a very, very scary time at that point. It looked like, because Republicans had just had the White House for 12 years before Bill Clinton. And 2 years into Bill Clinton's term, it looked like it was going to flip back Republican in 96. And that had everybody pretty scared that was on the left. And they're like, well, I guess we have to play ball. That was my thought at the time too, because I thought the same way that Biden did at that time. I wouldn't have put it that way, the same way he put it in some cases, but I had that fear. I was like, well, if we don't make a crime bill or something like that, we're going to get killed and we're not going to be able to do anything. We're never going to have power for another decade to do anything. And so we're just going to have Republicans who are going to do worse things than us for sure. And so, but the whole cabinet thing, okay. So he's against Medicare. What do you mean he's against Medicare? Medicare for all? Yeah, he's against Medicare for all, but he wants a public option, which, by the way, Obama wanted as well. He wanted a public option, and so did Biden. They wanted a public option for Obamacare, for the Affordable Care Act, the ACA, whatever you want to call it. But the Republicans in Congress were going to block it. Ted Kennedy died, and then Scott Brown was put in as a Republican. They didn't have a filibuster-proof majority, so they had to water it down. So they had to take out the public option. They didn't want to take it out, but the public also at that time was very split on whether there should be a public option. At this point, the public has come around to that decision. I think if they can get Medicare for all through Congress, then yes, I think Biden should sign it, and I think it would be a huge mistake if he didn't. But a public option is well to the left of what we got originally in 2010. And I would be at least reasonably happy with that for now. Getting a public option that at least gave people the option of having care. There should be universal accessibility for insurance. There shouldn't be anybody without insurance. At least there shouldn't be anybody without insurance that wants insurance. So, and it's in terms of cabinet members, Nathaniel. And okay, I've seen a lot of lists of cabinet members, right? I've seen a lot of stories. I saw someone put out a story about cabinet members saying Biden is, I think it was a Newsweek story. It was the most clickbaity BS I've ever seen. Total nonsense. It was like, oh, he's vetting these Republicans for a cabinet post. And I saw lefties, mostly the sort of Bernie or bust types, posting stuff like, oh, he's gonna make his cabinet half Republican or something like that. That is not what the story said. It wasn't even remotely what the story said. The title was clickbaity because it was like, oh, he's vetting all these candidates. Like, okay, yeah, he's vetting some candidates, but not for half the cabinet seats. He's vetting candidates for one, maybe two, somewhat ceremonial cabinet seats. He's not going to make can you imagine him putting a Republican in as like Secretary of the Treasury or Secretary of Labor or something like that? No, it's not going to happen. And I don't like this. I don't like that crap that I hear from people who are on the left, just fueling that fire. It's just wrong. It's completely incorrect. And so, and you know what? If I'm wrong, and half his cabinet is Republican, then okay, then you say, hey, Zaunstar, you were totally wrong, and he totally made half his cabinet Republican. But that's ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. Yes, and so CMB Reggae, the violent crime rate was at its highest. Yes, the violent crime rate was very high, absolutely, and that was the reaction was Republicans were winning on that issue. Democrats were getting killed as being soft on crime, and nobody wanted to see that. But now the tide has shifted because of grassroots protests, direct action, all kinds of other stuff. All these other things, by the way, really, really good. The BLM protests, all of that stuff has had a huge impact. And now that issue is much more front and center in the psyche of most Americans. And so now when Americans see this issue, they look at it very differently. So now there's an actual possibility to do something like that, to do something much more progressive on crime. Whereas at the time there wasn't. But of course now people kill Biden for having a position at that time which would be super unpopular and ridiculous now. Which, yes, that would be fantastic if everybody was on the right side of every issue every single time. That'd be great. And a lot of people compare him to Bernie, like, well, Bernie on that issue at the time was blah blah blah, and he was better. And yes, I completely agree. He was absolutely better on that issue. Does not necessarily mean he would make a better president. I do think he would have been. I did honestly once Elizabeth Warren dropped out. I was kind of hoping at that point that Bernie Sanders would win the primary, but I was like, all right, we have Biden, so we'll do what we can, and we won. So, see what happens. Let's see. Threaten also Lieberman killed the public option. Yeah, he may very well have, and he was in Lieberman. So now there's a guy you want to call someone that's a Democrat or Republican. I mean, yeah, Lieberman was certainly one of those guys that was kind of between, going between the parties and that kind of thing. Marvin G says, "Damn, forgot about you, homie." Yep, I still exist. Little known fact. I just don't make as many videos anymore, but I'm still around. I'm still having a good life. Still doing well. Doing what I can do. Ruby Rod says, more excited to see Harris up there doing her thing. Hopefully she runs for the big job next time. I like Harris pretty well. I know she's unpopular among people further left, but the problem is everybody in that field except for Bernie is equally unpopular to them. So except if you're not Bernie, but that Bernie is not going to be running next time, I would expect. So now you're going to have to figure out, well, who's the next big thing? Kamala, if she wants to run, if the Biden administration is fairly popular, if they're able to do some things that are fairly progressive, I think she, of course, would have the inside track. I don't think Biden's going to run again. I think he's going to just go one term. And by the way, I would give huge kudos to him for not having the kind of ego that Donald Trump had and thinking like, oh yeah, I'm just going to ride this one out. If he could just do one term and voluntarily be done, fantastic. Good on him. He could be a hero. He'd be someone that's like, I don't want to be too effusive in my praise of Biden for someone who he's not even president yet. So we'll see. But like in presidents, some presidents past, like Washington or whoever else that, or LBJ, people that like they could potentially have got another term, but they're like, no, it's too much. Let it go. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I do want to see Kamala. So Ill Hornet says Kamala sucks. So I don't necessarily want that, Ill Hornet. If Kamala does suck as a VP, and if Biden's administration in general is not good, then I wouldn't want to see Kamala anyway. Someone who actually impressed me a lot during this cycle was Pete Buttigieg. I didn't vote for him in the primary. I hadn't really seriously even considered him, but he is very quick on his feet, and he is someone who is possibly someone to watch. I mean, I'd consider voting for him. I don't know that I would vote for him necessarily in the primary, but I would at least consider it. But Ill Hornet, is there anyone else? So taking anyone else from the Democratic field last time, besides Bernie, Was there anyone you would have found acceptable? Because that's usually if you say no, then it's like, well, okay. I mean, who do you want? I mean, AOC, sure, she'll be just barely 35 if she ran next time, but I just don't think that's going to happen. So Glitch 42, that's who I voted for in the primary, was Warren. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think she's going to end up running again, though. I doubt, but maybe. Find out. I'd probably vote for her again. I don't know necessarily if I would even vote for her again in the primary. I have to see who's there. So, what's the funniest right-wing fruitcake take you've had today? Sticks and Hammer now trying to blame the Libertarian Party. Sticks and Hammer is a damn joke. That guy is just. He's just bizarre. Like, I just see this guy, the really thin face, and he's got the really long hair, and he's just sitting here like this, and it's like, well, the establishment of blah 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 blah. He's just, God, he's super boring for one thing. Why does anyone like that guy? Who knows? So Tommy from the Bronx. Hey, wow, it's good to see you, man. So Tommy from the Bronx is like an old school YouTuber, and I have the impression that he's kind of a Trumper, if I remember correctly. Are you a Trump fan, Tommy? That's I seem to remember that you seem to have some very conservative hot takes here and there. You kind of oh, you're not Trump or Biden. Okay, so you're what, Joe Jorgensen? I mean. And yeah, I mean, everybody who's going to run for president, I mean, you got to have a little bit of an ego. But I mean, you can't compare Trump's and Biden's egos. I mean, if Biden had lost, do you think he would have given a concession speech? Yes, of course he would have, because he's in that way, like, sort of traditional. Like, he wants to do it. He wants to do it right, right? Trump's never going to do a concession speech. I mean, or if he does, it'll be basically forced by his aides, and it'll be like read out like he's a prisoner, like last time. Like, live it imp, what's happening? Good to see you as well, man. So yeah, an erudite take on the core message of the day. Fuck Trump, yeah. You're not wrong. So yeah, that's pretty much what this stream is about. And also, I would like to do more of these streams as well. I'm trying to figure out the right format, the right, I'd like to talk to people as well on the streams, and talk to you guys, get your take actually on, like, maybe Discord or something. We'll figure out something. Now that I swear, like, just the election has been such a drain on me in some cases that, like, I just feel like I just keep moving forward and just want to not think about it. But now I feel like there's like extra mental room in my head for doing other things. So that's a good point, Tommy from the Bronx. I do suspect that there might be with Trump, the whole Trump crime family might try to continue with either. So if Donald Trump runs in 4 years, I believe he would be 80, if I remember correctly, by the time he would be in office again, which I hope never ever happens. But there's a lot of talk of, like, oh, maybe Don Jr. or Ivanka or somebody is in, and I can't imagine the Republican establishment at that point being like, yeah, we'll let this happen. They'll be like, ooh boy, no, I don't think. I hope they don't, but we'll see. Brett Keane is a mega fruitcake. Yeah, I'm sure isn't he now, like, gone from atheist to being a Christian like years ago? I don't know. Let's see. So Tommy, you say he'll be the same age as Tommy. Yeah, but can you imagine him coming back to be president now? Like, is he going to survive 4 years? He's not the healthiest dude. I mean, geez. They still don't know, by the way, why, like, last November he got rushed to Walter Reed. They're not sure if it was like they thought it was going to maybe a heart attack or a stroke, or they thought that he might have thought he was having a heart attack or stroke, and therefore went to Walter Reed. I don't know. I'm celebrating way too early, Coco Fan says. What would I not be? I mean, I'm celebrating too early. Too early for what? What is going to happen at this point that's going to take the election? I mean, Biden's already got 273 electoral votes. Georgia is looking almost certain now that he's going to win Georgia. Nevada has already been called for him. Even if somehow in Pennsylvania that gets taken away somehow, which I can't imagine, but he'd still win. Still has over 270 votes, even if you take away Pennsylvania. And he's still leading in Arizona. So actually, it's not. It's more likely Trump will be going into a news channel that was originally as planned in 2016, but also the IRS might be on Trump for tax evasion. Oh, yeah. IRS is going to be all over that guy. Can you imagine all of this stuff that's come out about his taxes? And he's got to be under so much pressure. Plus all that debt that's coming due. Something like, what was it? Like 400 million. I don't know. I don't even remember what the number was. It was just some ridiculous number that he had gotten loaned. Personally guaranteed loan, by the way. Personal guarantee. So he would be forced to liquidate 340 million. Thank you. $340 million loan. He's got a lot of assets, sure, but he'd have to sell a good chunk of them to make up that. And that would be, and the thing is, it's not like he couldn't do it. It's not like he would be bankrupt if he paid that loan, but it would be tremendously embarrassing for him. And for someone as egotistical as Trump to be like, oh, I'm just going to sell some properties and I'm going to pay off this loan. I don't think he's going to want to do it. Is someone from Canada happy we no longer need to deal with Trump's foreign policy? Yes. Hello to you in Canada. Like I said earlier, I think Justin Trudeau was super happy to be rid of Trump, and I'm sure that Canada is now super happy that you're not going to have a run on Americans trying to cross the border and come to your country, even though we're so COVID infested at this point that I don't think you'd take us anyway. And yeah, honestly, wouldn't blame you. Why would you want to? So, but anyhow, let's see. Yeah, the whole news channel thing with Trump, I think that might very well be. Let's see. Why would a Dem be celebrating? Senate Supreme Court to gum every you try up for 4 years and Republicans get to drop all the districts like everywhere? No, that is not how these things work. So the redistricting is done by states. So that's a state process, and most states at the moment at least have Democratic governors. In 2010, that was not the case. They had mostly Republican governors. So let's see, and of course state legislatures as well. But every state has their own rules on redistricting, so that's not like a federal thing. West Virginia, yeah, West Virginia is tending pretty red, for sure. I don't see any change in that anytime soon. I'm in the other Virginia, the non-West Virginia, so we've definitely been trending more blue over the years. When I first moved down here in 1997, we were a solidly red state, and I watched it go from solidly red to purple to now pretty solidly blue. So it's been pretty cool. Tommy for the Bronx says, do you think Biden will continue peace in the Middle East? I think not, to be honest. Well, did Trump actually? I mean, Trump moved. So Trump did something that was actually a huge sort of poke in the eye to the Middle East, and that was to move our embassy to Jerusalem, which was a terrible idea. It was just an optics thing. He was basically throwing Israel a bone, and there's really no reason to do that. There was nothing. We gained nothing from that. But of course, U.S. evangelicals wanted that. So I don't see that as being. So you're not talking federal. So what are you talking about? Well, so for the Senate, yes, of course, there's a lot of stuff. But as I said earlier, the killer clock, there's a lot of there are a lot of things that you can do at the executive level. Losses on the state level, state legislature level. I don't know how many seats were lost in the state legislature. There may have been some losses in state legislature. I don't know that they were big losses, but maybe you know something I don't there. I'm sure that there were some states, yeah, there were probably some losses in the state legislature level, but I can't imagine it was a blowout. I'm sure there were some states that lost some races, but I don't know of any blowout in that. Trump was also in talks to give Saudi Arabia nuclear weapons. Yeah, that's probably not a great idea. Do I think Trump will flee the country? Probably not. That would be hilarious, though, if he did. So if he does stay, he's going to be facing a lot of lawsuits. He's going to have a lot of people coming at him. Which state level losses were tough? I mean, North Carolina reelected their Democratic governor. There were a couple Senate races that I think we should have had, North Carolina and Maine, that we didn't get. So that was disappointing, but it wasn't a terrible night. Otherwise, it was kind of, it was sort of like, yeah. Pretty sure all of them. I doubt that's true, but I'll check. And plus, remember, there's a lot of votes still out. There's a lot of votes still being tabulated in a lot of those races. So there's going to be races, and in most of those races, that votes are still being tabulated. Most of those late votes and absentee votes, and a lot of those votes are going to be much more heavily Democratic than Republican, or at least somewhat more, in most cases, except again in Arizona, because a lot of those were like same-day absentee. But so anyway, yeah. Greetings, Ross. So, wonder if Melania will hang around now. Trump's in so much debt, she doesn't really have any riches to look forward to. Well, they still have all those properties. They still have plenty. She's not going to be hurting for anything. So, I don't think that's. I mean, I do love that meme though, where she says, "I dig grave for husband," and she's like digging in the rose garden. That's pretty funny. I like that one too. So it's a potential thing. Okay, so last question for now. The Thinking Cat, aka Neo Normie, says, which reversals should be done first? As I think the border cages and trans-military ban are really the most disgusting moves Trump put in place. Yes, those are two things that Biden can change overnight, instantly, and I'm quite sure he will. And not only when he does those things should he do them, but he should also make them public and make sure that everybody knows, hey, this is something that I did, I'm proud of, it's good for everyone. That is also going to go a long way, I think, toward helping those who were very skeptical about Biden's candidacy in the first place, among which I'm one of those people, by the way. I did not vote for in the primary. That would go a long way toward making us believe that, hey, Biden really is making the steps needed to make this country better, not to make the country great again. It's already fantastic, but in some ways at least, but it's not fantastic in other ways. And in those ways, I think you can change it. So, all right, well, I'm going to figure out what the future of this channel and stream, and when I'm going to do more streams. I would like to do more streams in the very near future. So, so if calling in and chatting with me about things is so those of you who are still on right now, say something. What are your thoughts on having a show where I can talk to you guys on Discord, not at the same time, but like one at a time, like have conversations with you about things as part of this stream, if I do a stream on a more regular basis. Is this a thing? Maybe. A lot of fun. I could have D. Landon Cole on. Excellent. Interesting. Well, thank you guys for showing up. We got almost 50 people, and I hadn't even put out a video in like a month and a half, and hadn't done a stream in longer than that. So thank you for coming, guys, and I will see you next time. Thanks, Crocoduck Army.